It's actually a miracle that Kelly came into my life. I just say. I met her 3 months ago.
About that.
3 months ago.
Well, we met a couple years ago, but we reconnected.
Yeah.
3 months ago.
Her mom is like this super joyous, beautiful, like dancing, partying all around town woman that I've been really good friends with. And I got to meet Kelly through her mom. Yeah.
I'm still in her phone as Carol's kid.
That's true. I gotta change that.
That's kind of cute.
That works. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're so brilliant, and you have so many incredible skills, and you've done so much self-development on your own, like prior to Groundwork, and you've always been, as far as I know, a very self-aware person. And so why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what the journey has been like, but like kind of pre-Groundwork?
Oh yeah. Hard to know where to begin. But yeah, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I got really activated around the climate crisis and started doing activism.
Yeah.
And I'd always been a vocal person before that, and I had been long interested in spirituality and different self-healing modalities, but I think it really got activated in the past 5 or so years. And I developed a lot of clarity around why I am the way I am. You know, I could see it all clearly, I could hold it in my mind, but I kept repeating the same patterns anyways.
Right.
And with activism in particular, I was like, I'm just killing myself trying to fix things. It's not working. And I need to step back. I need to get like right for myself before I can help anyone else, because, you know, I don't think I'm making things worse, but I'm certainly not making things better. And there was, I studied with Squamish matriarchs. That's one of the First Nations where we're from, and they have a teaching about the double-headed snake of helping and harm. So you can think you're helping, but you can actually be causing harm. And I could see that in myself, and I could also see that in other patterns in my life, in particular with seeking love and validation and worth through both work and relationships. But I remained in those patterns, and it became more and more painful because I knew intellectually that it wasn't working and that I needed to change, but I didn't know how to change. And I went deeper into all sorts of studies and working with different types of coaches and different modalities, but like it just made me more confused because I was gaining more and more information, but I wasn't getting out of those patterns. And so when I met you, reconnected with you, I was in such a state of overwhelm and confusion and living with a lot of doubt, because I could hold all of these things in my head, but I couldn't bring them into my body. And so since starting Groundwork, I've been bringing things into my body and identifying the doubt as a survival response, and the confusion as a survival response, and the overwhelm as a survival response, and starting the grieving process of releasing all of those things, and then connecting more dots, like recognizing the confusion not as something that was true. Like I started to, because I've done so much research into how the world works, and like on a deep esoteric level as well. I'm like, well, at the bottom of everything is divine paradox, therefore it's okay that I'm confused. But that's actually not, that was just me lying to myself, keeping myself in a survival response that just wasn't serving.
Yeah. I mean, you were looking for relief, like we all are.
Yeah.
We're always just all looking for relief, right? That's all that's happening. Yeah. Got it. And so you weren't getting the full relief that you were looking for.
Wasn't getting relief, but I'd find little pieces of relief or moments, and like, you know, I kind of like have these times where I'd be able to tap into that, but then I'd swing back and do the pattern again because, you know, someone asked for my help, or I was triggered by something in the world. Well, people need to know about this, you know. Every time there's another climate disaster, it's like, well, wake up everyone. And it's like, even though I'd done all this research to understand that communicating to people that way doesn't work.
Right.
like I'd still be in my anger, and then I'd communicate that way, and then I'd regret it and feel guilty and pull it down, and then go into this whole spiral of like, why am I doing this? I need to be better, and then like start just self-flagellating, you know, like not enoughness, perfectionism, and martyrdom,
Yes.
like, and responsibility. Like, if I can just understand everything and communicate it properly, I can fix everything.
So good. So good.
But there's nothing to be fixed. Ultimately, like what you talk about, like it's a journey.
Yeah.
There is no destination.
Yeah.
And the ego wants answers. The ego wants a place of arrival.
Yes.
But it's always going to be a practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
I mean,
like,
unless you reach spontaneous enlightenment, which, I mean, maybe that's what that is.
maybe.
Maybe.
A few have had it on this planet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's right.
maybe we'll all get, maybe that's what's coming, or, you know, maybe we just learn to live with deeper and deeper triggers of pain as we move through this black hole that we're going, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call what's happening, you know, this total cataclysm of change that we're in,
Yeah.
the paradigm shift.
Yeah.
I love, I'm a big fan of quotes, and as
Yes.
as you were leading up to this, I was like, yes, Princess Bride, like, life is suffering, princess. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something.
Yes, right.
Or life is pain, not life is suffering, right? Because there's a difference between pain and suffering.
Yes, yes,
Pain is inevitable.
Yeah.
Suffering is optional.
yes. Very well said. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. And so, the practice of dropping in, how's that been for you?
It's been wonderful. One of my survival responses is to be overly emotional and to like go to this place of upset, and like that's been a huge piece for me just this week, because like there's the grief that needs to be held and felt, and the pain that needs to be sat with, and then there's the heaviness of the story of not enoughness that feels very similar, and I can go to that place thinking that I'm like, oh, I'm doing the work of being with the pain and grieving, but it's actually just
Centering the emotion.
and like living in the story of not enoughness. And so dropping in, there's two experiences for me. There's the experience of where I drop in and I'm like, right, and I just need to move this through. And there's the experience where I drop in and I go, oh, there's nothing to drop into. That was a pattern of upset that I'm just using to beat myself up with. And there was actually like the drop in just like makes me see clearly that I'm like, oh, I was just doing the survival response.
Yeah, it's just in it. Yeah.
It's sophisticated,
It is, yeah.
the survival responses.
And as you start working at the like top layers, then more subtler layers start revealing themselves, right? You're like, oh shit, I do that too. Yeah. But freedom as well.
So much freedom and like new levels of ease that I hadn't experienced before. And it's like there's a relief where you go, it's kind of like uncomfortable in a sense, because you're like,
Yeah.
I don't, wait, what is this
Yeah.
feeling of not being anxious?
Yes.
Like, and then the grief for me, I think, like, so it's been these waves of like relief,
Yeah.
and then grief at like, because in the grief, like there's authentic grieving, and then there's also more stories of not enoughness, of like, wow, how did I let myself carry on this way for so long?
Yeah.
But I didn't have the tools.
Yeah. 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 And kind of like what we were saying, sharing earlier about like grieving, even just the suffering that we go through, right? Yeah.
Just holding the younger versions of myself, and you know, finding the place of grace.
Yeah.
Especially when I can like look back and see my journal entries, and I see such clarity there, and then I know that I repeated the pattern anyways, even though the clarity was present. And so there's grief for that, but it's an invitation to gentleness because I just didn't have the tools.
Exactly. And otherwise it would be, I'm not enough playing out anyways.
I realized my perfectionism was manifesting as the confusion as doubt. That was like one of our first breakthroughs. Like
yes. I
that,
remember that one.
that like that not enoughness, that perfectionism like was like so sneaky that it was showing up as confusion.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, whoa.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's cool too because a lot of like how I've watched you go through the journey is like, yes, you've used your mind to like understand yourself and see yourself, but also a lot of the clarity has kind of arose. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. As you've just been with the intent of working through that and letting all of that go, right? And kind of going to that deeper place inside of you that's just more, like you said, grounded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, recognizing that I understood this intuitively.
Yes.
But everything that I went through led me to where I am today.
Yes.
So recognizing that lessens the not enoughness. But recognizing is like, oh, intuitively I understood all these things.
Yeah.
But I didn't trust myself, or I had more to learn. I had to go through these things. And so it's like a coming back to myself.
Yes.
After going through all of these, like, I think about it as like pushing the boundaries, or like I needed to touch the edge of something to have that understanding, to then to be able to speak from that place.
Yeah.
And then come back to the clarity, because I know that we all have that knowing inside of us.
Yes.
Like deep down, like maybe we can't touch it right now, but it's there.
Yeah.
And it's like a remembering.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's a remembering. That's exactly what it is. Yes. We've talked a little bit about the cycles of grief that people go through as they deal with their pain. It's interesting. One of the things that I started to track, because it's become so obvious in myself also, but as I've been working with hundreds of people that I coach and stuff, is like we actually go through. So when we uncover the survival pattern, basically the ego mind or the identities that we carry begin to fall away. And as they begin to fall away, they sort of go through a last cycle where they really pick back up damn strong. And they try to hijack you a little. But it feels so uncomfortable by that point that it's just false. It doesn't feel good, it's not serving you. But it's almost like the identity's fighting for itself one last time, and it kicks back up. And then there's a grief that comes with it when it lets go and it releases. And I find it so funny that I think that I talk about these things now, because it's just so not who I was before, but it's so clear to me that that's actually, there's a cycle that we go through as we release old patterns. And that I think is also important to remember, right? That it's that's why it's a practice, because it's ongoing. We're releasing old identities that aren't serving us over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How's that been for you? Are you because it sounds like now you've got a lot more space even in 3 months.
Oh yeah.
Like incredible space, right?
Huge. Yeah, I think being with the witnessing of it and not judging it as I've been going through it again has been really pivotal. Just like seeing it and accepting it and watching it in a new way.
Yeah.
And not trying to shut it off or shut it down, or like, if you repeat a pattern, like, or you recognize much faster, like, oh, that was a survival response.
Yes.
Not beating myself up.
Yeah.
Just like bringing in the gentleness.
Yes.
And just accepting that the grief is a part of it, and making the space for rest.
Yes.
And like, I definitely have, a survival response of working too hard. I think we all do. And so working for you has been such a gift, because you're like, yeah, good work for resting. And I'm like, I need to keep going. And you're like, do you?
Chill out, Kelly. It's gonna get done.
Yeah, and I'm like, but I'm not, it's not enough, it's not, and you're like, so it's, yeah.
So good.
Oh.
So the next thing that we're about to talk about with everyone is what heals the pattern. And the activities and ways of being that we cultivate to really, again, like normalize non-survival based living. Because again, we walk back into the world, burnout is an epidemic in the US, right? We are not set up, the systems and the structures that we have in place are not conducive to non-survival based living and operating. So on the topic of rest, what have you found by letting go and resting more? What has become clear to you?
attempting to rest for many years. And I think, and I'd work, I'd talk to an intuitive coach, and they'd be like, you need to rest more. And I'd be like, but I am resting. Like, what do you mean I'm not how do I rest? Like, I don't, like, what does that even, so like.
Yeah, we don't know what it means. It's true. We don't.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, and even, a couple weeks ago, we worked on the weekend, and so you're like, make sure you take Monday off. And what I ended up doing was working on my own stuff.
Right.
But I was totally pushing it. And, I was like, well, but there's just all these subtle ways in which, like, well, this is restful because I'm doing it from bed. Right. Like, I'm in my bed working, so it's, like, definitely more restful. And, like, so, like, I think really opening up to just like a fullness of the experience, like a permission to turn off, and like the system, like the system that you all will learn and that we're learning in terms of capturing and scheduling has created so much space, because I'm like blocking things out now, and then it's just like, oh, there's an openness here, and I'm following my intuition more. It's like, I just want to go for a walk, or I want to go read my book in the coffee shop.
Yes.
And like, even some days where I'm like, oh, I had work scheduled, but I'm like, oh, I see I can push that over here. Like, just really following my gut.
Yes.
And so I'm finding actually like a deeper sense of rest instead of this sort of like half kind of rest that I'd been taking on.
Yeah.
So it's changing
like rest
the
without
way.
the self-flagellation.
Yeah. Well, resting, but like thinking about all the things, like about like, well, I shouldn't be resting, and like it's. I know we're all so twisted up in the work. This notion of like, well, 40 hours a week minimum, right? And like hustle, but you need the side gig, and like how are you gonna monetize your hobbies?
Yeah.
And like, I've, as a freelance writer and artist and filmmaker, really struggled making a living, and so I realized that I tried to monetize all of these passions, all the things I was doing, and it always felt incorrect. There was always a tension there, and like it wasn't working, but then I would keep pushing, and then I'd be like, what? And then it goes into the what's wrong with me spiral.
Right.
And recognizing like the way that I judge the way that I'm received has been a real key for me, like the bitterness in particular. I don't know if any of you know human design, but I'm a projector, so my not self, the bitterness, when I learned that, I was like, oh no. Like, human design is like kind of like astrology, and like everyone has a different makeup, and they say like, oh, for projectors, when you're bitter, that's how you know you're not being yourself. And I experienced so much bitterness around like, well, why isn't my work taking off, or why isn't this relationship working? And I've learned as soon as I'm putting it on to the external, so I'm not dealing with something that's coming from pushing, and then it's like, well, it's your fault, or it's I'm wrong, and then it's your fault, and I'm wrong, and I'm not enough, and then it just pain, adding pain onto the pain onto the pain.
Yes. Yeah. And so to just see all that clearly, it's so funny. I mean, I definitely have like people regularly, I mean, I would say every week at least, that will send me an email, or coaches that people that I work with that will tell me that they've spent 10 years in therapy and haven't been able to get to where we got to with the framework. I just trained the Dean of Psychiatry at UCLA and her core team. And in the training, I was like, Dr. Hansen, like, I apologize if this framework seems really obvious to you, and obviously with your background and PhD in psychiatry, I'm running an entire school. This, may not be relevant to you, and she was like, she looked at me on the camera, and she's like, oh no, she's like, I need this. So it's all of us, right? We're all in it. But yeah, I think that's also part of why we need simplicity right now. And you and I have talked a lot about this. I mean, as you know, I'm a complete minimalist. People come into my home and they're like, oh God, I get it. And I think we need simplicity because everything else is so complex. And without that simple way of accessing our own clarity and cultivating that clarity in our own lives, it's difficult to overcome everything all the time, right? And that's why so much of the work, even the survival pattern and the system, is all about the simplicity of it, and using that simplicity as a way to empower and deal with the complexity of life coming at you. So I know you're going to clean out your storage locker, and you've been cleaning out your journals, and you've been dealing with your tasks, and all your dreams and hopes, and getting it all in front of you, and like slowly chipping away. So what's that? What would you say that's been like for you?
Well, that's been amazing. Like I behind the clean desktop, inside the folders, like I've been working on this screenplay for 5 years, and I think I have like 60 different drafts and all of these notes, and just like years of notes. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, no kidding, I haven't been able to finish this. Right. No kidding, I'm overwhelmed. Like, it's just like chaos in here. And so like I've been going through and like organizing, deleting, like, but that's been part of the grief process. Yeah. Is like, wow, yeah. What was I thinking? You know, it was just like throwing all these ideas and thoughts around, and like not completing things. And yes. So now it's like, what needs to be brought to completion, or what needs to be let go? Yeah, I think is a big piece. Yeah, it's been really confronting. It's been really confronting. Just recognizing how much I was operating from a place of cognitive dissonance. Right. Because any rational person can look inside that folder and be like, well, it's probably not working for you. Right. So it's been really, really wonderful to like take the time and to put it into the schedule, and to space it out as well, but also to notice, like, if I go a week without doing that, I start getting like a little, or at least I was feeling agitated because I wasn't engaging in that continued kind of sweeping. It's just like, yes. It's like, what is the Zen code? Before enlightenment, chop wood.
Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Yeah. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Yeah.
And it's kind of like that with like the sweeping. Yeah. It's just like you sweep, and then the next day there's dust again. Yeah. And dead bugs. Yeah. And like whatever else, but you just keep sweeping, and I keep having big ideas and like kind of throwing them around, but now I have a system. And now I go, oh, like, yeah, I threw a bunch of ideas into that folder. I screenshotted a bunch of stuff that I was going to use here, there, and but now every week I'm going to like go through it. Yes. And reorganize it. And it's also helping me just create less in the first place. Exactly. Because I'm staying on top of it, and I've been documenting a lot as well. And so like looking back at previous documentation, I'm like, wow, I really didn't need to document like that. That was a bit much, but I saw that was a survival response. Yeah. When I wasn't accessing validation or community, or wasn't feeling worthy, that I would go into this like intensification of like documenting or like collecting, and like it's kind of like a safety mechanism.
Well, information hoarding is a thing. Yeah. It's a definite thing. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a total survival response, right? Fear of missing out, FOMO. I hope anyone's got FOMO. Put that on their list, hey? Survival pattern. FOMO's a big one, right? And FOMO has us do all kinds of crazy shit. Oh my god! But like people will they fight, because part of what you're about to see this, but part of the system is really letting go of like what you're holding on to in your various folders in your inbox. Oh boy, it's funny. I show people like, deal with your survival pattern, deal with all your projects and your priorities, but when I get them to that piece, they fight me so hard on it. And I'm like, okay, why are you holding on to this information? They can't actually give me a valid reason. They're just afraid to let go of the information. There's so much fear of missing out, and we think that by holding on to stuff that someday I'll get back to it and someday it'll be useful. And it's just like, yeah, it's we need to keep letting go, and just that minimalist approach to, it's like information's always coming at us. Stuff is always coming at us, right? So there does have to be a way to let go of things so that new things can show up. It's difficult for new creativity to arise when you're bogged down, right? Like as a creative person, you probably see that all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's just like there's a lack of clarity there, right?
Yes.
And because it's just like, it's a lack of completion, I think.
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about, as we work with the system tomorrow, what it means to bring things to a state of completion. And that means even if we're bringing something to a state of completion by saying, yes, great idea, no, not doing it. That's complete. So we'll talk a lot about the peace of mind that comes from bringing things to a state of completion along the way. Any final thoughts or words for these wonderful people?
I did want to share another quote.
Yes!
I thought of, it came to mind, it's a favorite passage of mine. And I think it's appropriate because we're going to be talking about the healing patterns.
Yes.
And when you were talking about Marshall Rosenberg,
Yes.
and our core need, and it reminded me of this passage from Pablo Neruda, who was a South American poet and revolutionary, and he won a Nobel Prize, and he said this in his speech: "There is no insurmountable solitude. All paths lead to the same goal, to convey to others what we are. And we must pass through solitude and difficulty, isolation and silence, in order to reach forth to the enchanted place where we can dance our clumsy dance and sing our sorrowful song. But in this dance, or in this song, there are fulfilled the most ancient rights of our conscience, in the awareness of being human and of believing in a common destiny." And I wanted to say, because when you speak to capturing and how it creates space for creative thinking, and I think we all understand that creative thinking applies to any field and any act of life.
Yeah.
But often in our society, we don't view creative expression as applied to everything. We relegate it to art, or
So
these
true.
so-called creative arts.
Yes.
But every expression
It's creative expression.
is creative expression.
So true. Yeah. Yeah. The way we experience our lives is a creative expression. Beautiful. I love that. Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. That was perfect. Thank you.